Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 5 Episodes 1 and 2, because they both went out together. They're called Red Directive and Under the Twin Moons, respectively. Discovery's back, and it kind of snuck up on me. I forgot it was coming back this month, and it especially surprised me when I went to check it out, and there was 2 episodes ready to look at, which is always a great sign that you love a show when you see 2 episodes and get annoyed that you have to watch two. I've never been like super passionate about this show. It's always been something that's kind of limped along, and it's been checked out because it happens to be Star Trek and because me and Connor have been doing the old shows, and then Connor dipped out, Tara tagged in, so now that she's gone, I'm left to talk about Star Trek Discovery on my own, which is not a task that I'm particularly excited about, if I'm honest. But it's the last season. You know, it's a slightly shorter season as well. It's 10 episodes. There's 8 left after today. It makes all the sense in the world to finish it off, just to have it all done, because it's been reviewed since episode 1. It would be such a shame not to have it all completed. But my excitement was not high. I'll say that. And I think it hit me as well, and this happens every time this comes back. Every the start of every season of this show, there's this moment in the first episode back where I kind of realize like why I don't like it that much compared to other Star Trek shows. And it's, you know, a lot of it isn't necessarily because the IDs are terrible. A lot of it is more just it's determined to be this flashy action movie of a TV show. Lots of quick edits, lots of big over-the-top action scenes. I mean, episode 1 of this season has this ridiculous scene where 2 starships sort of like shield a city by like kind of tilting in front and creating a big shield barrier. It's a whole thing. And it's that kind of stuff where I'm watching and I'm going, this just doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. And maybe that could be somewhat subjective to a point, but coming in with mixed feelings about the whole thing, and certainly was worried that I'd forgotten every character and everything that had ever happened to anyone on this show. And there's definitely a couple whose names were not coming back to me immediately. I had to check out 1 or 2 names before I started this recording just to make sure I had something to call certain characters. And I'm not talking about the new characters. The new characters, obviously, I didn't know. You know, Rayner, who's this new captain, who have a different starship, who by the end of episode 2 is seemingly going to be the first officer on the Discovery, replacing Saru, who's agreed to take a more diplomatic role back at the base, and he's happy to do that in part because his Vulcan girlfriend is there. Well, I should say Vulcan fiancé. They get engaged by the end of episode 1. So that's a whole thing that's going. It does kind of feel like the show, you know, they know obviously this is their last season, so there's a lot of things being put in place to give the characters potential, natural ending points. Tilly's already taken this role, teaching. Saru's now potentially going to have a wife and this new job. But presumably we're going to be doing something with Book and Michael over the course of the season to kind of wrap up their story. That's all fine. There's nothing wrong with any of those things on their own. It did feel a little bit weird though in episode 2 where like Saru's coming back out for one last mission. Tilly's like back temporarily for reasons. It did kind of feel like we're just kind of like ignoring like the reasons why they shouldn't be here just so we could still have them be here kind of thing. But I think my bigger complaints tend to be kind of like it's kind of suffering for some of the problems that Star Wars often suffers from, where the world feels kind of small. And the big thing that made me feel that way in this is there's a reveal in episode 2 with Book, or Booker. I keep saying Book. I think Booker's more accurate in this show. I think I'm thinking of Shepherd Book from Firefly. But Booker, he ends up helping, and again he's another character who's like, oh, now he's working with the team because he's got a specialized knowledge of these types of villains, and that's why he's here to help out. Again, it just kind of feels like, wait, but we just had to have a big heartfelt goodbye. In fact, the previously on in the first episode reminded me, oh yeah, he had to say goodbye, he had to sort of make amends for all the stuff he did last season. Even if he had the best of intentions, he's effectively serving time for that. And immediately there's a reason why he's back with the rest of the crew. It really might have been a good idea to try and, I don't know, make us miss him a little bit. You know, I know it's been a long time since season 4 aired, but and for the characters, they're saying, hey, it's been months since she's even talked about Booker. But I don't really feel that when I'm watching it, because he was literally in the last episode, right? There might be a gap between those episodes, but that time missing doesn't really feel like it's there. But he has a revelation that one of the villains they're chasing in episode 2 is someone he knows. It's the daughter of his mentor. So kind of like a surrogate sibling in a way. You know, if his mentor was kind of like a father figure, then this would make this girl kind of like, he even says it's the closest thing he might have to actual family in the whole universe. Assuming he's not counting Michael, which, I mean, they're kind of broken up, but still. That like kind of rubbed me the wrong way as soon as like he kind of started having this revelation and explained it to Culber. Because it just kind of felt like, oh, this world feels tiny now. Like, we've got all these planets, we've got all these different things we could be doing in the Star Trek universe. And the fact that the villain involved in this huge plot, that's the entire season-long plot of this season, happens to be connected to Booker. And it's not even like, it'd be one thing if she was connected to Booker and that's why they brought Booker in, because, hey, you've got a history with this person, so we're bringing you in. The fact that he was brought in independently of that for a relatively weak reason, all things considered, and then it turned out he was connected to the villain, feels really convoluted to me, and just kind of felt like it's one of the that feeling is something I've had since season 1 of this show, where it constantly has to draw these connections. It constantly does this sort of like over the top forced drama with a lot of things, and it'll accent it with the direction where there's a lot of shaky cam, a lot of Dutch angles, a lot of quick cuts, all that stuff, and it just kind of all feels like it's trying so hard all the time to elicit a reaction. But that's all it feels like to me. It just feels like it's trying hard. Same with this action, you know, there's a lot of big stuff in episode 1 where it does that thing where it opens with a little snippet of what's coming later, and like Michael's in this weird position where she's like on top of a ship going really fast. I think they're in warp speed, and it just teases that, and then later on we get to the context of that, and it does a whole thing where when she eventually jumps off this villain ship and she's effectively picked up by the Discovery, she just floats in through the force field of the bridge on the Discovery, and it's this big set piece moment, and all I could feel was like, oh my, you're trying so hard to be cool. Like, you want that to be cool, and I feel like it's just trying so hard, and I feel like this show has been doing that since episode 1 of its entire show, of the entire thing. It feels like they're always trying so hard to be this cool show, and they do have insanely impressive effects for a TV show. Go way back to episode 1, season 1. That's something we said, hey, for anything else we don't like on this, it looks like a movie. It looks like they've got the budget of a movie for their episodes, relatively speaking. And that's still here all these seasons later. It looks great in that sense, but I do wish they had a different visual style, a different editing style. I wish it wasn't always trying to feel slick. And maybe this is just J.J. Abrams' fault for establishing kind of what the new Trek style is with that 2009 movie, but it was really irking me here. And I think it's actually something that's gotten worse for me as the shows went on a little bit, because I've been seeing more and more and more of classic Trek, and we're at the point now where I'm on the last season of Next Gen, I'm in season 2 of Deep Space Nine, and Deep Space Nine's a great example of, like, it feels a little different, it feels a little bit more mature, a little bit darker than Next Gen, but it still feels like Star Trek. It still feels like it feels like it belongs in the same world. And when I'm watching Discovery, it doesn't feel like it's in the same world. They can reference as many things as they want. It's one of the things, just in the last couple of weeks, the new Ghostbusters movie came out, and we reviewed that. And one of the big complaints about these new Ghostbusters movies that I've said numerous times at this point is that, yeah, they've got the Ecto-1, they've got the proton packs, they've got the firehouse, they've got the outfits, the logo, all these material things that people associate with Ghostbusters, but they don't really have the core, like, sense of humor and heart. I mean, the heart's not even the right word, because there wasn't heart in Ghostbusters. It's a very witty, dry, cynical kind of comedy, but that part of it's missing. The actual soul of what made Ghostbusters isn't there. It's just all of the things that were in Ghostbusters that are there, that they're referencing, that they're bringing up, they're talking about the characters. That's what Discovery is like to me for Star Trek. It's like, it's got the things, it references, there's a big reference obviously in the first episode to a Next Generation episode, which I'm glad I've seen before I got to this. I'm glad we'd done that episode, because I think that was a season 6 episode, I want to say, so it's not been that long since I saw that episode. But, you know, they reference things. They bring up Jean-Luc Picard, they'll bring up Beta Z, they'll bring up, you know, planets you recognize, races you recognize from classic Star Trek. But the actual flow of it, the actual soul of what makes Star Trek, I do think just kind of feels missing. And I'll stop there, because I feel like this is just general stuff that's been, I've probably said in various ways throughout the entire show. But again, it always hits me again in a new premiere of one of the seasons, because it's like it comes rushing back. Season 2 was a little, not season 2, sorry. Episode 2 was a little bit better. At least, you know, it didn't feel like it was as over the top with its direction and as over the top with its action. It did feel a bit more, you know, slower, which I think is good. I think episode 1 feels too jumping around, too much like yelling at each other, action scenes coming out of fairly quick out of nowhere. Anyway, what's the core plot of the season? I should get into that. The core plot of the season, based on these first 2 episodes, is that these 2 bounty hunter, well, not maybe bounty hunter, couriers, thieves, pirates, whatever you want to call them, they are hunting this artifact that is on a ancient Romulan ship which has shown up somewhere in space. And David Cronenberg shows up. I can't remember his character's name, but he's been around, and says, this is a code red, this is top secret, we need this artifact from the Romulan ship, your mission's to get it back no matter what. But the bad guys have already gotten there first, and they have stolen this puzzle box that was on the Romulan ship, which has got a secret item inside of it, which later turns out to be a diary, which is, you know, in this, you know, old language or whatever, like they have to sort of like try and decode what it's talking about and stuff. And the planet they're on with this android broker who's like data ends up being where this big set piece happens with Captain Rayner inadvertently inspiring the villains to cause an avalanche, which is going to threaten everyone in the town. Which, on theory, I like. In theory, I like the idea of like, oh, we have to abandon chasing the villains to do a more heroic thing. We have to save the innocent people. But it all just kind of feels like a big whiz-bang action scene with like big spectacle effects and stuff, just because we can, rather than because it presents them with like interesting character choices or whatever. I was just kind of numb to a lot of the action, honestly, especially in episode 1. I just wasn't feeling really any of it at all. But the big thing, of course, is what this ends up being, this diary, and what it actually is. Because throughout the episode, David Cronenberg keeps refusing to tell Michael or anyone else what it is. Even the Admiral doesn't know. But eventually, at the end, Michael makes a big speech about how he needs to let her in on it if he wants her to do her job properly. And this is when it ties back to a Next Gen episode. It ties back to the episode of TNG where there's this alien race that seemingly is responsible for most of the other life in the universe, right? In particular, all of the humanoid life. So there's an episode of Next Generation where it kind of basically gives an answer to an extent as to why a lot of the life that you see on Star Trek is similar, right? Like humans, Vulcans, Klingons, like everyone's kind of humanoid, right? Everyone's got 2 arms, 2 legs. There's a lot of similarities. Now, the answer in real life for this is that it's because it's all human beings in makeup playing these various races, and that's why. But it was kind of an interesting thing to try and kind of give that a reason, give that kind of an answer. And this is sort of harkening back to that. It turns out that the diary is kind of talking about the location of some hidden technology of this alien race that was apparently something that was used to create life. So this season is now this race to find this item, this technology that will help people create life. And obviously they don't want the wrong people to get their hands on it, because who knows what they could do with that. And by the end of episode 2, they even kind of like turn it into a bit of an Easter egg hunt, where at the end of episode 2, they've got to the location described in the diary, and they've got like a bit of a riddle and like one part of an item. But it turns out there's 5 parts to this big key item, and they're going to have to like go to the next place, which is Trill. That's where episode 2 kind of wraps up, is that, hey, the next piece of the puzzle's in Trill. And I feel like this, there's nothing wrong with this, but it does feel very simple and just like a series of MacGuffins. And I swear we've done this before in Discovery. I can't even tell you when we did it on Discovery because I've forgotten a lot of those previous seasons, if I'm perfectly honest. But I feel like this is just really simplistic. Like, oh, there's 5 magic keys. We have to get the 5 magic keys. Each one will have a riddle to the next place. It feels like some of this is going to be a little formulaic, right? And I think I'm a little concerned that probably like 2/3 of the season is going to feel quite samey because of this. I could be wrong. But I did not find myself being filled with excitement when we got towards the end of episode 2 and they're like, hey, there's 4 more pieces to this thing. We have to race the bad guys to get them. And they're going to the wrong place because they didn't get all the riddle properly. They only got 4 parts of the riddle. We got all of it. They're away to Beta Z and we're going to Trill. Yeah, okay. It's you know, I appreciate them taking something from one of the classic episodes and trying to build a season plot around it. I don't hate that. That's perfectly fine. It's them pulling on Star Trek history. You could read it as a bit of a nostalgia pull, and certainly having watched 3 seasons of Picard, I'm definitely used to them playing up nostalgia and going for the cheap wins by just bringing up things from the past. But this was a cool, interesting concept of an episode of Next Generation, so having them explore it a little bit further is perfectly fine. But the way they've actually set it up is how it's going to function in the season, where it's just this chase for 5 MacGuffins, does feel really overly simplistic and not that interesting at the outset. So we'll see how that goes. A lot of episode 2 is about it being Saru's last mission with the crew before he takes his new job. And it had a lot of like 2 days till retirement feelings to it. I actually almost thought they were going to kill off Saru just because, well, we can't have him have a happy ending. He has to be the tragedy early in the season. Luckily, they didn't do that. He does make it back. He is going to go and marry his Vulcan love and live happily ever after. Or whatever. So, that's all fine. A lot of the episode, like I say, it revolves around Booker realizing he's got this connection to one of the villains. And that'll make him... And... Like, I think this is my other problem with this. Not only does it feel like such a contrived like connection between the 2 characters, this character who, I mean, maybe we saw this character before. There was definitely stuff when Booker was introduced where we saw his planet and we saw people that he knew. I don't know if this character was meant to be one of them. I doubt it, given that she's an adult now, and that wasn't meant to be that long ago in the timeline. But regardless of like shoehorning in a character he doesn't know, we already spent the entire last season, and forgive me for getting a lot of the details, but a lot of the last season was about him going against what he was supposed to be doing for the Federation because he believed that what they were doing was wrong and that he knew better. I feel like we're maybe going to have a kind of a similar thing this season where he is, because he's got this connection to one of the characters, he's not wanting to go into just like brand her a villain and not, you know, he's probably going to be tempted to help her or give her some assistance or try and turn her over to the good side or give her some speeches. But I'm willing to bet that at some point in this season, there's going to be a scene or a moment where he jeopardizes a mission because he tries to talk to her instead of like helping arrest her or whatever it may be. Like, I don't know what the exact specifics would be, but there's going to be something where he's going to get into trouble again for not just doing what he's supposed to be doing with the Federation. And I felt like we just did a whole season where it ended with him getting this kind of like, oh, he has to learn the lessons of his mistakes. He has to, do his time and sort of like learn what he did. Because he was plying a lot of big, dangerous stuff with the scientist did last season. And it should have had consequences. And I think they've given him this season to once again make him feel like he is this outlier to everyone else, where he's not really part of the crew. He's this separate entity who might be out for himself, even if it's understandable and relatable reasons, because he cares about someone here that he doesn't want to chase after like a criminal. That's fine on its own. And it was fine that he was kind of like not really one of the crew or not a part of the Federation before. Like initially that was fine, but we've done that already. So I feel like at this point, the actual growth I would expect for the character is that maybe he does feel more like he's part of the crew. And it isn't just about him and Michael having a relationship. Maybe he does just become someone who can work and be a part of the team. But it feels like they really want to still play up this idea that he's going to have his own motives and his own agenda that's separate from what Starfleet and the rest of the crew are doing. And I'm worried that it's just going to feel like, oh, we're doing more of the same thing with him. It's a different, thing that he's doing. It's a different reason, and the details are all different, but fundamentally it's still the idea that he is going to be doing something for himself that contradicts what the rest of the mission is for the characters in the show, or on the ship at least. So yeah, feeling kind of murky about that, feeling kind of underwhelmed that it is just this MacGuffin hunt for the season. The drama of Michael and Booker like feeling awkward because they're not in a relationship anymore and they don't know how to act around each other. I like their relationship was fine. They had decent chemistry, but I never really felt all that connected to it. Or, I think it's one of these things where this show is very, very guilty of telling us how people are or who people are, instead of just letting us experience who they are. There's a joke, and this was a decent joke actually in episode 1, where Michael's kind of pissed because Captain Raynor's just went off and done his own thing, and Booker quite rightly points out that that's a lot like her, and that she has done that many a time in the past, and I appreciated that because that is something we've seen her do many a time. So it felt like a justifiable kind of like joke slash like knock at her character, in context. It was nice and playful, it worked. But the show is very guilty of like saying, oh, someone's this or someone's that. A good example here is that when Tilly's on the ship and she's talking to, it was Adira she was talking to, and she's talking about teaching and, being back with her kids and blah, 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 or her students rather, because they're probably not kids, but you know what I mean, relative to them. I think Adira just says, oh, you're so good at teaching. And I'm like, is she? We've never seen her teach a class. I don't think. Well, okay, we saw her with a bunch of students before she officially became a teacher. I remember that. I remember that being like a plot line like early last season. Or was that season 3? I really don't remember. It was probably the last season. Before she made her choice to become a teacher. But I don't think since she officially became a teacher at Starfleet Academy, I don't think we've seen her interact with a single student. So having characters just walk in and compliment of how great a teacher she is and how they're lucky to have her, it just feels like you're telling me things as opposed to showing me them. And I'm like, this just feels like a baseless accusation to me. I've not seen any of this. And it kind of happens a lot in Star Trek Discovery. I was feeling it throughout this where, right? I think that's the big thing, is that characters start talking about things in ways that feel unnatural. I guess what I'm saying is I just don't like the dialogue that much. Another one with Tilly, actually, again, it's not Tilly herself, but Michael, when she sees her in episode 2, says, oh, I'm so glad you're here with us again. You'll have to thank your kids for letting us have you. And it felt so forced and kind of clunky as a line of dialogue. Like, it almost feels like it's trying to double up and do this thing where it's reminding us of the status quo. It's reminding us of how things have changed since last season. It's reminding us that Tilly's a teacher now at Starfleet Academy, whilst also trying to really emphasize this idea that she's really great at being that, and she's found her place doing that. And Tilly says that. Tilly says that multiple times. Oh, I've really think I've found where I belong. And then she says something to the effect of, oh, and maybe being out here for a mission will give me some new perspective to how to teach my students. And it all feels like fluff, because like, it doesn't feel like a real plot line. It feels like you're just pretending she's off doing all this other stuff. And I don't really believe you. I don't feel like I've seen any of this, and yeah, there's like a minor romantic bit with Tilly. There's like another teacher she's into or something that she awkwardly flirts with in episode 1. That was a thing. I don't have much to say about that really. Anyway, I feel like the show is rife with that kind of writing where it just tells us how special someone is, or it just tells us how good two people are together. A lot of the relationships are very much like that on this show. I think at one point Adira talks about Grey, and it's all just sort of dialogue exposition. I think Paul and Culber, I think, have been guilty in the past of like, I feel like I hear a lot more about what their relationship is rather than just seeing it. We're just updated on the status quo. I think that's my best way to put it, is that I feel like with a lot of the character relationships on this show, we're just constantly updated with where they're at, as opposed to seeing where they go from A to B into C, and where we're not getting the actual drama in between. We're just getting excessive bullet points, I guess. It's such a weird thing, but I feel like someone much smarter than me, who's like got like some kind of like degree in script writing, would probably be able to like break this down and talk about why at least I'm finding the characters and dialogue in this show so unsatisfying. But I am, and that's not changed here, I think, with this pair of episodes, especially episode 1, which again, with all the rapid action and quick cutting and tons of handheld, lots of dramatic close-ups. And that's the problem. If you use nothing but dramatic close-ups, they start to lose their effect, right? You like a good dramatic close-up is really effective where you're going for the emotional moment after you've had some time building it up. But if you're just doing tons and tons of dramatic close-ups, it just becomes the norm, and if anything, it becomes a little bit annoying. I feel like I am just kind of rambling at this point. It's one of those things. I'm so worried about talking about this show for the next 8 weeks, because I'm really concerned of how little I'm going to care about the actual plot, and therefore I might just end up reiterating why I broadly don't like the show that much. But I will try and do my best to focus on the details that are presented to me. This first one's a little bit different. One, because it's the first episodes back, so everything's fresh again, and 2, I had to watch 2 episodes back to back, and you know, some of the stuff kind of blurs together. I mean, the 2 pirates seem fine as villains. They're probably villains that are going to be a bit more sympathetic later on, especially since one of them has a connection to Booker. That makes some sense to me. Yeah, I don't. I just don't have much else to say on these 2 episodes. Honestly, if I am being 100% honest with you, I'm just glad that it's almost over. I'm looking forward to this being done, and I never have to talk about Discovery ever again. I will be delighted when we get to that point. 8 episodes left, baby. Let's do it. We're almost done. So let me know what you thought of this pair of premiere episodes in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Unless you love Discovery, you're just mad that I shat on it for, 25 minutes, 30 minutes? I have no idea. I had to break in the middle, so I don't know how long the overall recording is. So thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support all the content and keep everything coming. But thank you once again. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?